We'll get started. Good morning, everyone. State Representative Rick Krajewski, Chair of the Commission. We're going to get this public meeting into order. We'll start with doing just roll call. So I see here virtually, we're joined by Commission members, Professor Rago, Chairman Fox, Senator Street, Representative Bonner, and then I'm going to have to rely on our executive director to name off who else is attending in person in State College.
We have Judge McLaughlin, Attorney Balkovic, Judge Marsico, Mr. Winerowitz, Judge Daly, and DA Bible here.
Okay, excellent. Sounds like we've got a quorum. Well, before we dig into our agenda, we'll open it up for the public comment period. Is there anyone that we can see that is waiting for public comment?
If there is anyone attending who wants to present public comment, just use the Zoom function to raise your hand. And we do not seem to have anyone, so.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Christy. Moving right along, we'll go ahead to approve the minutes of our previous public meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Moved by, who was that in State College?
Judge Daly, sorry.
Judge, no problem. All right, moved by Judge Daly, and seconded by Senator Street. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All those opposed say nay. Okay, approving of the minutes. Great. Okay, well, all of that housekeeping out of the way, I will go ahead and pass it to our executive director, Matt, to take us through the next part of the agenda.
Great. Thank you, Representative Krajewski. I'll start by having the reporting out of our ex officio members. So I'll begin with Chairman Fox.
Thank you, Matt. We don't have a lot to report. We are happy to report, however, that we do have a full board. We are now at 9 board members after being at 8 or 7 over pretty much the last year, which is very good. The new board members are Christian Stevens. He was the deputy secretary from Field Services, so he oversaw all the parole field services for the Department of Corrections for about 8, 9 years. He held that position. And then also the retired U.S. Marshal for the Middle District of Pennsylvania, Martin Payne, has also been appointed. So we are at a full board. We're very glad about that. And the other, update is we are starting to now transmit data on the sentencing guidelines that have been, or the parole guidelines that have been put together by the commission. So we're starting to get information and transmit that. So hopefully we'll be able to do more analysis about parole decision making in the future.
Great. Thank you, Chairman. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Winerowitz from the Department of Corrections.
Just a quick update on the StrongR inter-rater reliability exercise. It's been finalized. We did pilot it amongst our institutional assessment coordinators. We did roll it out to our counseling staff, case managers across the state. We rolled it out to all of our SCIs. Participations and outcomes are being monitored for baseline purposes. Participation in the exercise will be a yearly requirement of staff. Institution-specific results will be reviewed during each SCI's annual ops inspections. And the results will give staff a sense of any training needs that may need to be addressed in order to optimize assessment reliability. And then plans are in the works for the parole field services to have an IRR exercise of its own with case examples that will be relevant to community supervision. And then just another quick update for the Strong Arm Phase 2. We're expected to roll out our Phase 2 in the summer of 2025. The Strong Arm will also become the DOC's classification tool, thus replacing our PA additive and classification tool PACT, which we've had in existence for probably over 30, 40 years. Never made changes to that tool. It's never been validated. So this is a good chance for us to really take a look at how we classify and identify custody levels for inmates moving forward. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. I'd like to recognize Professor Rago, I believe, has a few comments to add.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everyone. Some of you may already know this, but a very, very dear friend of ours passed away this month, Judge Jeffrey Manning, a president judge here in Allegheny County, who was an icon, among other things. His work was legendary. Professor Mystic and I, of course, knew him very well. I know members of the commission knew him. He was a commissioner for 7 years. He did some remarkable things, not just in Allegheny County, but throughout the Commonwealth. I can't begin to tell you the impact he's had on all of us, and it continues even though he's gone. Jeffrey suffered, he never quite made his retirement age of 75. A few months before that, a calamity of things happened to the poor fellow, and including the onset of dementia and other conditions. And over a 2-year period, we lost Jeffrey. It was very, very difficult for all of us. And I just wanted to make sure the commission knew that this was a great man and a great friend. And just very briefly, just 2 quick paragraphs, just to give you a sense of how strong-minded this person was, and never afraid to do the right thing. In May 22 of 2017, he testified in front of the state Senate on behalf of his views, but also the commission's views on mandatory sentencing. And here's what he said in his testimony. He said, "The mandatory sentencing scheme that this Senate is considering today is essentially the same that became effective 6 weeks after I took the bench in 1988. I've dealt with the provisions of this and other mandatory sentencing statutes for as long as I've been a lawyer. As an assistant U.S. attorney and first assistant U.S. attorney for the 12 years before my appointment to the bench, I dealt with the Federal Anti-Drug Abuse Act, which required mandatory sentences for certain drug offenses based on the quantities involved and the extent of criminal participation." And here's the body blow he delivered, and I'll spare you the rest of it, but this is important. "As an experienced prosecutor and as a judge, I considered mandatory minimum sentences as unnecessary infringements on the proper role of judges in imposing sentences. They provided no appropriate assistance to me as a prosecutor, and as a judge have forced me to impose sentences that I considered unjust and counterproductive to the purpose and the goals of sentencing." You know, it's an old expression, you know, speaking truth to power, but Jeffrey was never afraid to do the right thing, whether people agreed with him or not. And many of the lessons that I learned from him as his first law clerk, I was a brand new kid out of law school, didn't know anything. And he shepherded me into this profession of ours, and I miss him dearly. I know Joe does and others do too. And I just wanted to make sure the commission knew that our dear friend had passed. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Professor Mystic.
Yeah, during those 7 years when Judge Manning was on the commission, a highlight for me was traveling up here and back with him every quarter. He always insisted we take my car, but that he drive, take control judge, and it was always an exciting, maybe a little more than a 2-hour trip from Pittsburgh to Harrisburg. I had the honor of introducing Judge Manning when he received the Duquesne Law Alumni Distinguished Alum Award a few years back. And I said at the time that he knew the law. He knew the law very, very well, but the law's the easy part. He also knew justice, and that's his legacy. That's what made him a great judge and a great friend. Thank you.
Great, thank you to you both. The first action item on our agenda is to ratify the separation from InfoMatrix. As I mentioned, and Christy went over during the policy meeting, for a number of reasons, it was determined that continuing our work with the consulting firm InfoMatrix was suboptimal and inefficient in our progress in developing the Commission's on Sentencing's Record Exchange, the replacement for SGS Web. Many meetings with Representative Krajewski and Judge Marsico, and then a vote of the Executive and Administrative Committee. So in speaking with Professor Mystic, thought it was prudent to receive full approval from the Commission on ratifying this decision. So the action item reads, and then seek a motion for this. The approval to ratify the decision of the Executive and Administrative Committee for the early termination of the service purchase contract with InfoMatrix as of July 31st, 2024. And in the notebook materials, information about that can be found on pages 18 and 19. And I'll just highlight one last thing, which was we made sure that all work was completed and deliverables were finished before that date of separation, and payments were made for those deliverables, so there's no outstanding work. And as Christy noted, it was roughly 40% of the progress, but also 40% of the assigned budget for that project.
I mean, we terminate the relationship, contract, whatever.
All right, sorry, Sid, was that motion already made?
Yes. Judge
Okay.
Barstow, Judge McLaughlin seconded.
All right, there we go. Easy enough. All those in favor? All those opposed? All right, motion passes. And I'll just say, just to echo what Matt said, I know this wasn't a decision that Matt and Christy and the rest of the team took very lightly, but given the importance of the project and the depth of changes and work needed, definitely, and talking with Matt and understanding made the most sense. So appreciate the commission's support on this. Thank you.
Great. So in addition, we had a discussion about our budget at the policy meeting, but this meeting marks the closeout of our fiscal year 23-24 operating budget. So I will refer to you to pages 23 and 24 of the notebook materials. And I just want to highlight two things from which have been talked about in the past, but just to highlight from the operating expenses. So we had approved or earmarked or thought about $8,000 related to education and other travel. As you know, and Unit Manager Bobby from the Education Outreach Unit will highlight again, a tremendous effort was made for outreach activities during the last year, visiting almost every county and reaching out and working with almost every county, as well as presenting to associations, individual judges at individual courts. So we spent an extra $11,000 for that line item coming out of $20,000, which was a necessary and an important expenditure, something we didn't anticipate. And then the second one, just to highlight, is under the SGS web, we anticipating with our contract with InfoMatrix of spending roughly $900,000 to that vendor on that project. We only spent about $235,000 of that money. So when our last $400,000, I'm sorry. I was
like, wait a minute.
last fiscal year, that was $235,000. So as you saw, we have reserves left in that JRI 2 money in the earlier presentation, but that remaining budget was roughly $660,000 of that work with the consultant. So this is an opportunity, as Christy noted, for moving forward as we refresh that project. There may be cost savings by not having all this external work, and we'll see at the December meeting how that that plan works forward. Okay, the next item is to make a small modification to the fiscal year 24-25 operating budget. And this is on page 26. As I noted this morning earlier, Penn State periodically assesses the fringe rate that applies to Penn State employees for salaries related to things like retirement and healthcare coverage and so forth. So the fringe rate has increased from 0.359 to 0.399. There have been times historically where that fringe rate has been over 40%. So this is within the historical bounds of what's been done by the university. And the implication can be seen on the total salary line, where it goes from $2,786,257 to $2,852,493. So a little less than $100,000 increase in our budget based on this change in the fringe rate. The second item to note is what I just highlighted with that next gen project, the CASER project. We previously had $687,000 allocated for the vendor for the continued work. Thinking about the way that Christie's unit may be working with consultants in this coming fiscal year, it was determined that, as Christie noted, and we'll get to this later, a small service purchase contract with one individual or the vendor to begin, and maybe future contracts after the calendar year, so that line item decreases to $400,000 as our estimate for work with consultants during that period. So the proposed modification, despite the increases in salary, actually decreases the approved budget from $4,884,000 to roughly $3,864,000. Sorry about that. So we're seeking a motion for approval of this modification to our operating budget.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Second.
All right. We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Great. And with that, I will turn it over to Ryan Myers. Oh, I wanted to make one introduction. I apologize, off the agenda. Got lost there for a second. Just want to welcome our new Deputy Director for Research and Technology, Dr. Noah Painter-Davis. As many of you know, we have been searching for my replacement during the spring as the Deputy of Research. We're really fortunate to have Noah join us from the University of New Mexico, where he spent 11 years as a faculty member working on issues of criminology. But also notable that Noah was an intern when he was a PhD student at Penn State here at the Commission working on our research project. So we're really fortunate to be able to have hired someone who knows our data, knows sentencing, knows Pennsylvania, grew up here in Pennsylvania. So Noah began with us on July 1st, so just wanted to welcome Noah formally to his first commission meeting.
Thank you.
With that, my apologies, I'll turn it to Ryan.
Thank you, Matt. So I'll be covering just a few items here and then turning it over to Bobby Seesock to give the update from the Education Outreach. I think for all of the members that were present during the June meeting, I spoke long enough during those, so I'll be short here today. Earlier, during the policy meeting, Matt had mentioned the NAS conference, so just some quick updates. That was held in the beginning of August, and we had, I believe our count was somewhere around 10 staff members attended, and our chair of the commission attended. We're always sort of a large agency there and a good representation, but not just attending, staff participated in 4 different sessions. Matt had mentioned the one session that Christie participated in as a panelist in discussing building out applications. We talked about strategies for introducing and communicating new policies, and so Bobby was on a panel for that one. There was a plenary, I believe, on what guideline states can learn from non-guideline states, and Matt was engaged in that. And so we had a number of sessions, and I think it was important for staff to be there, and I'm glad that we give back to the NAS conference and that we're not just simply attending and consuming. So I appreciate the commission's support in sending staff there. And then just quickly, we had mentioned this in our newsletter earlier this month. The first executive director of the commission, Dr. Kramer, was awarded the Kern Award from the NASC Association, which is given to somebody in the sentencing field that has done a lot, not just in their state but nationally. And I think it's great that the commission has 3 Kern recipients at this point. Both of our previous executive directors, Mark had received it several years ago, and a former chair, Professor Channinson, had received it. So, again, just some quick updates on NASC. Moving on, you've heard me talk about this now for several meetings, but an update on where we are from a status standpoint for our 2022 and 2023 annual reports. We have pretty much an initial draft of the 2022. It's on Matt and my desk to knock that out here. I think we'll have that pretty well cleaned up and ready to go and circulate to the commission here this fall. Concurrently, we'll be working on drafting the 2023, and the plan is that we will have both of these projects checked off by the end of the calendar year. which gets us back on pace for 2025 and working on the 2024 annual report. Just as a note, and this is consistent with past practice, while we haven't released the 2022 annual report, available on the Commission's website are the data tables that would be included in that. And so we did that during the 2020 and 2021 report. So we just wanted to make sure that we could get that information out there while we finalize, some of the more tedious parts of the annual report. So, and then lastly, as far as education partnerships, you know that we are engaged in 3 MOUs from the educational side with Penn State Clearly, and so staff teach in the fall and spring at Penn State, and so that course began 2 weeks ago, I guess last week, and that's a course in sentencing, believe it or not. The other course that we teach in the fall through an MOU is with Duquesne Law School, and that one is in sanctions, sentencing, and corrections, and it's a seminar course for law school students there. And so that began last week and second week of that course. And then some looking forward with Villanova. We're preparing for the Villanova sentencing workshop for next year, which takes place in February and March. And we're hoping that several of our newest members here on the commission will be able to attend, participate in that. So that's all I have. I'll turn it to Bobby unless there's any questions for me, I'll turn it to Bobby.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. Got a couple updates for everybody. And so kind of speaking to a couple things that have been mentioned earlier in the policy meeting and Matt's comments related to budget. I thought now is a really good time to really highlight our education and outreach efforts as part of the 8th edition of guidelines. I believe my information starts on page 31 for those of you that would like to follow along. But some of the highlights I just wanted to talk about, first and foremost, this will probably be the last time I take a look back in 2023. But we started our county tour the end of August. I think it was August 26th, 2023. So a full year ago. We had the opportunity to hold 128 educational sessions from that period of time, provided 260 hours of content, and reached over 4,650 people. So as Matt mentioned, our budget, I blew it up a little bit there, but I think it was work well done, and really appreciate the effort of the education and outreach unit in going out to the counties and meeting with individuals, providing the content, and moving forward, I'll really talk more about what we've done since January through July for the purpose of this meeting. Beyond the educational sessions, we also have produced and posted to our website a variety of documents and other resources available for individuals. So our reference guides, the full searchable text of the guidelines, and other materials are available. And Matt had mentioned a little bit earlier, we've kind of pivoted a little bit in what we're offering and how we're offering some content to individuals. So we now have 2 e-learning modules that are available for individuals, and in the next several weeks we should be doubling that up and have 4 of those. So we're really looking to continue to expand our portfolio of e-learning to be responsive to practitioners' needs. We're also still working on some YouTube policy videos. We're nearing some completion on our early videos that we have. So keep an eye on our YouTube page for some of that information as well. In terms of technical assistance that we're providing, from January through the end of July, the help desk has responded to 258 inquiries and processed 289 SGS web role requests. So pretty good volume of assistance to individuals. We are seeing, I think was mentioned earlier at our last meeting, based on the modeling, we're starting to see more 8th edition cases flowing through county court systems. So we're getting more questions in that realm as well, and certainly some questions from individuals related to getting refreshers on 8th edition stuff. So our regular portfolio of courses that we have, Those are, I think as we get through the fall, we're going to see some upticks in attendance in those as well. For the legislative and case law tracking, we do track all of that. You can find some summaries on that in the notebook as well, keeping us abreast of any changes from the General Assembly or the courts, and making sure we're aware of that as well. Related to Right to Know, we've had 3 Right to Know requests so far this year, and we've responded to 48 pieces of correspondence as well. We did hold our first Education and Outreach Committee meeting August 1st. And so we really highlighted the efforts of what we've done so far in the calendar year, and really mapped out what we're looking to do moving forward. I think Matt mentioned earlier, we're in phase 2 of our education plan. And so looking to continue to build that. And really, the unit has been looking ahead to 2025 to again, continue to iterate and evolve what we're offering, how we're offering, to make sure we're responsive to the needs of judges and attorneys and probation and other users of our information. Some of the highlights, just looking at calendar year 2024, January through the end of July, we held 66 educational and outreach events totaling 100 hours, and we reached over 2,000 attendees. I think it's nice to highlight some of the diverse entities that we've partnered with in various ways. Certainly, the County Chiefs Association of Pennsylvania, AOPC, and the New Judges School, we've had some sessions with them. The Department of Corrections, the Defenders Association of PA, and PCCD, as we work through the review of county IP plans, are just some of the ways that we're reaching out to different individuals and trying to meet those needs. So those are just some of the highlights I wanted to bring to your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. One last note, sorry, I forgot. I was to present one of our e-learning modules based on time. Well, that was we're going to look to do that, I think, at the December meeting. So look for that later.
Great, thanks, Bobby. I'll just highlight one other component from your unit that you and Ryan spearhead is our Lunch and Learn series, which will continue through this fall, and information about that's available both on our website and in the newsletters. The goal is, I believe, to present 3 additional ones this fall. Is that correct?
Yes.
3 additional ones this fall. We've had great turnout, and I think it's another opportunity for us to reach diverse folks, but especially our legislative members, and a number of legislative members do attend those right now virtually, but sometimes also in person. So thanks, Bobby, for the update, and with that, I will turn it over to Noah.
Good morning, everybody. It's very exciting to be here. I've gotten a lot of support since arriving, especially from the executive director, the senior deputy director, the research managers, and the managers, and the staff. And I'm very excited to be working on several initiatives, making progress on SR 196 and on story maps. 2 main things that I wanted to focus on for my brief updates was the fact that we're working on trying to improve our partnership with Penn State University and the Criminal Justice Research Center, trying to move to calibrate the relationship to focus on research that does more to address legislative mandates for the commission. And these relationships are very key for speeding science to practice and for providing more value to the Commonwealth from our universities and university partners. A major part of this is our postdoc, Nicholas Goldrosen, who started about 10 days ago from the University of Cambridge. She has a very exciting research portfolio and research plans, and we're integrating him into the relationship that we have with the Criminal Justice Research Center to do this work. The second main item is intra-agency data sharing. Well, one of our year-long objectives, which I'll be working on with the research managers and Christy, is to keep moving to improve our data sharing practices with our partners, such as the Pennsylvania State Police, the Department of Corrections, and the Administrative Office of the Courts. Again, this data sharing is key for speeding science to practice, and we're moving to smooth those data sharing processes. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll move on to Brett.
So let me just add a few things. I think it's what Noah mentioned is really important, these partnerships. And in the previous role that I played, you know, we have, as you might remember, going even as far back as the risk assessment, working with Carnegie Mellon to get an external review and evaluation of that tool. We have an amazing set of universities here and research centers and faculty that we can partner with to advance our work, to help disseminate our work. And so Noah is going to be working closely with the folks at Penn State. The head of the Criminal Justice Research Center is Dr. Jeff Ulmer. Another note, Jeff Ulmer was a postdoc at the commission when he got his PhD, so all roads lead back to the commission. And we'll also be working with a former postdoc at Drexel University, Claire Strange, who continues to do an evaluation of the 8th edition guidelines. Also work with Professor Jordan Hyatt at Drexel, and just seeking opportunities for this partnership. The real amazing part of that is to leverage their work basically for free when we give them the data to generate research findings that then we can bring back to the commission to inform our work and the work of sentencing here in the Commonwealth. So thanks, Noah. And with that, I will turn it to Christy for the update on application information technology.
Thank you. And since I spoke a lot earlier, I'll keep this brief. Since our last commission meeting, staff has continued to work on the development of the CASER application, which is our replacement, or eventual replacement for the SGS Web application. As we discussed during the policy meeting at the end of June, our partner that we were working with, Infomatrix, did tell us that they could no longer commit to completing the project within the remaining contracted budget. So given some other issues with them, we did decide to mutually end the relationship. They have been paid for all deliverables that they completed by July 31st, which was effectively their last day on the project. As far as work that has been completed, we are roughly 40% done. In our next meeting, at the December meeting, I'll plan to do a live demonstration of the application so that you guys can actually see the progress that we're making rather than me just telling you about it, showing you some screenshots. So with the departure of Infomatrix, we're taking some time to reassess our staffing on the project, the timeline. We're taking some time to address some design and implementation issues, as well as resolve some outstanding technical debt that we have. I did share in the policy meeting our roadmap for the project moving forward, and we will be working on a new project timeline or schedule for that, which I will also share in the December meeting once we've had a chance to get our feet under us. And then instead of outsourcing the project to another vendor, we have decided to have our internal staff manage and execute the project for the remainder of the project. So we will need to hire a few individual contractors to supplement the unit's skill set. The most immediate staffing need for the project is a front-end developer. We have identified a company named Carbon Creek in Clearfield, Pennsylvania, that can help us with this. So Carbon Creek has worked with a wide range of clients to develop new applications and modernize existing systems. So we are looking to start with just a short-term contract, a 3-month contract with them to provide a front-end developer. And then if all goes well with that exercise and with this person, we would look to extend that contract or relationship with them. So we do have a service purchase contract that we're looking for the Commission's approval to execute on. I turn it to you, Matt, to
Let me just add
set
something,
that in
and then I'll
motion.
turn it over to the chair in a moment.
Okay.
So in the notebook materials is a draft of the service purchase contract on page 39. And then on 41, you'll see a professional services agreement with the vendor Carbon Creek. After speaking with counsel, it was determined that this professional service agreement was redundant with our service purchase contract. So we can kind of ignore what's on page 41 and onward of that lengthy the professional services agreement. But to modify the service purchase contract, we've added one sentence to what's in your notebook, and I'll read you that sentence now. I'll read you this is at the bottom, other conditions or agreements. Carbon Creek will invoice the commission monthly at a rate of $100 per hour. We've added now, the commission agrees to pay the amount owed within 15 days after receipt of an itemized and approved invoice. So that was the one element that was not specified in the service purchase contract. So a very tiny modification to our service purchase contract, but we will be seeking approval of the service purchase agreement, so just the front and back page on 39 and 40 with that small amendment that I just mentioned. So with that, I don't know, Professor Mystic, if that sufficed?
Yeah, no, that's an accurate description. The vendor had come back with a rather lengthy list of terms and conditions that were superfluous and not consistent with the manner in which the Commission has executed service purchase contracts in the past. So we determined there was one item they were most concerned about, simply added it to our usual format, and they've agreed.
Great. So I will turn it over to the chair, noting again that it's just one sentence will be added related to payment of these monthly invoices within 15 days after receiving. After the work has been approved and the invoice has been approved, we pay within 15 days.
Okay. Seems pretty straightforward. Do we have a motion to approve the purchase contract?
I'll make the motion.
All right. Motion's made. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. We have a second. All those in favor?
Judge Marchico.
Aye. Judge Marchico, second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Motion passes.
Thank you. So just a couple more updates. While we've been mostly focused on the CASER application, we do continue to support and maintain the legacy SGS web application. On August 20th, so just a couple weeks ago, we deployed several fixes and enhancements to the legacy application. One of the bigger changes was a new case reporting summary report that counties can use to help them monitor the submission of sentencing data to the commission for that JRI-2 reporting. We also added a new resentencing reason to help support Act 44 of 2023. Else can tell you more about. And we added some fields related to program eligibility to our monthly export for data analysis. One of the other things I'll mention that we've worked on is several months ago we talked about partnering with the Legislative Data Processing Center to help us provide a backup of our files and our data, just so that right now most of our files are stored within the Penn State ecosystem. That gave us kind of like a second place for us to store our important files. We've also been working with Penn State to implement a backup strategy to help protect our files against ransomware attacks. So that's something new that we've been working on. Apparently those are ramping up. So lastly, I'll report that as of July 31st, we've had 58,216 sentences submitted with 2024 dates of sentence. And that full report is available in the supplemental materials if you have a copy of that. Unless there are any other questions, I will turn it back over to the chair, the executive director, or Brett.
Great. Thanks, Christy. So any questions for Christy? And again, we've covered a lot about the transition away from using this vendor and her path forward. So seeing no questions, I'll turn it to Brett Miller for an update. Brian.
Yeah, if I just wanted to add two things quickly here. As Christy mentioned, this new SGS web report, and to put this in perspective, the Education Outreach Unit fields hundreds of calls, and as they support reporting of sentences to the commission, we are often doing these reports behind the scenes with Brett and Christy and the Education Outreach Unit, and this actually just moves all of that internal work external so that the counties can do it themselves. And what's really important about that is that they can do that every single day throughout the year, where before we were running these sort of at certain intervals, maybe once or at most twice a year, and counties were having to rely on us. So, should be a very big benefit to counties and should hopefully streamline all the work we have to do in the beginning of every calendar year to make sure they're fully reporting. And then just on the reason in SGS Web around resentencing guidelines, you might recall during the June meeting, we went through Act 44 of 2023. And one of the areas that I had raised for the commission, I think there was some discussion, was when there would be departures from the resentencing guidelines, particularly due to the limitations imposed on the court because of Act 44. And we wanted to make sure that we were able to see when that was occurring through the resentences reported in SGS Web. And so we simply just added a reason. So if a court has to depart because of the new law, they can select that as the reason. And then it'll give us an indication of how that's sort of impacting resentencing guidelines. And we can monitor that moving forward and report back to the commission should there be any need to revisit the established resentencing guidelines. That's all. Thanks.
Great, thanks. With that, I'll turn it to Brett for an overview of the research and data analysis unit.
All right, thanks, Matt. The full unit highlights can be found on page 51 of the notebook material. I'll just hit on a couple highlights here. Excuse me. So obviously we've been very busy working on Senate Resolution 196, the veteran studies. We've heard a lot about that already today, but we're about 3 months, excuse me. We're about 3 months into our 15-month timeline. So the resolution passed in June and the final report is due September 2025. So over these first 3 months, we've really been focused on developing our project plan and timeline, working with our advisory committee. And then sort of my role, the first 3 months has really been focused on trying to get this information on veteran status. And this has really been one of our biggest challenges up to this point is we've got all kinds of data on the courts and corrections, but we've had a lot of challenges trying to identify which of those individuals are veterans. So as Matt outlined earlier, we don't collect veteran status in our data. DOC does collect veteran status, but it's not always available to us. And the courts, again, ask voluntarily for self-identification of veteran status, but it's not necessarily definitive. So as Matt mentioned, we have identified this veteran registry search service operated by Veterans Affairs. One of the real benefits of that system is that it allows us to conduct batch searches. So we have over 500,000 individuals that have been through the court system over the past 5 years. And our plan is to basically take those 500,000 people and submit them to the search service to identify which ones are veterans. So it's a little bit even beyond the scope of what they typically do, but we've sort of outlined a process with them that we can work in batches, send these requests to the VA, and then receive the veteran status back to the commissions. One of the kind of wrenches in this process is that they require a social security number of each of these 500,000 individuals. So of all the data that we store, it's all technically stored on Penn State servers, which creates a bit of an IT issue for Penn State. We've been working with Penn State's IT and security teams to try to come up with a solution where they'll provide us with a special secure location that only our staff can access and will be sort of locked down and separate from the rest of Penn State IT. So we've made that request, currently pending with Penn State, and basically we're waiting for Penn State's security officer to sign off on that request, and then we'll be able to, once that's signed off, we'll be able to then start our process, which will go through state police rap sheet requests and then over to the Veterans Affairs, and then finally back to us with all of this private information of these individuals involved with the court. So it's sort of a long, convoluted process to get this information, but I think we do have a plan in place that looks like it'll work for us. As Matt mentioned, also one of the next steps on the study outside of data collection will be making our first site visit to Allegheny County later this month, where we'll meet with a variety of stakeholders working with veterans. And moving on to state parole guidelines. The state parole guidelines were implemented the middle of 2023, sometime in the summer. And so they've been, the parole board has been using the guidelines for the past year plus. As part of the implementation of the guidelines, we entered into a data sharing agreement with the parole board, where they'll share the information on parole recommendations and decisions with us. And in return, on a quarterly basis, we'll provide data reports back to the parole board, highlighting conformity to the guidelines. Eventually, when enough time has passed, we'll provide recidivism reports and things of that nature. So we just received our first data extract from the parole board that has the first full year of parole decisions using the guidelines. Now, the next step in that process is for us to take a look at that data that's provided and start putting together templates of what we want those quarterly and annual reports to look like to the board. And then we'll begin delivering the first reports either at the end of this year or maybe within the first quarter of 2025. And then lastly, so I'll skip over our sentencing data stories. We covered that. But lastly, I just wanted to talk about some of our collaborations with different agencies in the state. So earlier this summer, some commission staff went to visit PCCD staff and talk about different ways that we can collaborate with PCCD on a variety of projects, but especially when it comes to data sharing and data agreements. So we talked about a lot of different projects, including the veteran study, population projections, our county compliance with the sentencing guidelines we conduct every year. And then just talked about if there's anything we can do to kind of ramp up our partnerships with each other. So coming out of COVID, a lot of initiatives that we used to do as agencies have sort of slipped away. One thing we'd like to bring back is there's a Criminal Justice Population Projections Committee, which used to meet a couple times every year prior to COVID. And during COVID, it sort of slipped away. So one thing we'd like to do is revive that committee and talk about work together to collaborate on population projections, but also work together to improve data sharing and work together on different research projects where we can. And then finally, over the last few months, we've received data requests from several different outside entities. And just to give you an idea of who's requesting this data, we've received requests from the Department of Corrections, House Judiciary Committee, ABC National News, requests from several universities, Penn State, Cornell, and then received a request from the Pennsylvania Juvenile Court Judges Commission, JCJC, and they're collaborating with researchers at the University of Washington. We provided data for them as well. I think that's it for me.
Great, thanks, Brett. I think the meeting with PCCD is very promising, and we've had meetings with DOC, and we hope to have meetings also with AOPC and get all these different actors together, because each time we do a project, we have to request the data from the individual agency, likewise back to us. But thinking about how to link, especially the big gap here in Pennsylvania is data that's at the county level. And there's no, in some cases, unified case management system, and how to get data from local probation, from jails. So the statewide data we do pretty well, and you've heard us talk over the years about improving our processes with the Pennsylvania State Police, about how we get rap sheets. So I think there's opportunities for us to learn and grow. And for example, we didn't know that AOPC collected data or information on veteran status. We didn't have a code book of all the variables, and we made an inquiry, and yes, they do, but the reliability of it is not the greatest variable for us. But just having that conversation about what information exists in each of these agencies and ways we can support each other in these bigger questions that we have. I think a long-term goal, maybe in my lifetime, maybe not, would be to have a unified way to look at data from pre-trial all the way through post-release supervision and everything in between, from local to statewide. Again, probably not in my lifetime, but a big challenge for the system as a whole to be thinking about how to share data and information, because as you know, we'll receive mandates or requests to do studies on pretrial, mandates and studies to do post-supervision release. And so we're having to match and merge different data sets, which is also laborious and time-consuming. So more on that as we continue to meet with our partners. So with that, I'll turn it to Ryan for a policy update, specifically about monitoring and implementing the 8th edition guidelines.
Thanks, Matt. If you want more information, in the notebook on page 52, I provided a little extra description. I thought for the purpose of having to be the last person to speak during the business meeting and in way of your lunch and departure, I would distill this down to probably 4 big takeaways. I think you've heard us talk about this in past meetings and to some degree today, but continued education is part of this process. There's new staff members coming into courthouses each week and month, so we can't assume that the work done 6 or 9 months ago will suffice moving forward. So staff here are continuing to do that, and that helps with the application of the guidelines. We track all sorts of information in multiple ways and venues. We track legislation and case law, so is there any impacts on the guidelines through that? And then we're also tracking any of the inquiries that we receive from counties. I think that's a really important thing because that's about as, that's really close to the counties and we know what's happening. And when we're receiving those and we can see how many of one particular type of inquiry, it gives us a real indication on where to deploy, our efforts as far as education, and certainly bringing information back to the commission in that policy feedback loop. The third thing I wanted to mention was just informing. How do we inform individuals, whether it's the education or outreach, but when there's changes, we make sure we have information on the website. We do a monthly newsletter. So there's ways in which practitioners can access changes or updates relative to the guidelines and sentencing. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention, this would be the fourth and the final thing, is technical assistance. We do that through the help desk, and that gets to tracking inquiries and also providing continued education. But, that's a lot of work with Christie's unit and SGS Web. And so without the education outreach staff being so closely connected to practitioners in the state through the help desk, I think we might, miss some of those changes and updates that we need to do in SGS Web. So with that all being said, we continue to see cases come in until we get to the end of this year, and I believe really early, the first quarter of next year, we'll probably start to see the vast majority of 8th edition. So with that, I will turn it to Matt to cover miscellaneous and the rest for you.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And before we adjourn, I just wanted to thank, on the record here at the business meeting, Representative Bonner for agreeing to chair the Senate Resolution 196 Advisory Committee, to thank the advisory committee members who are going to continue to work with us. And then finally, our visitor and our guest today, Mr. Negreanu, who's a Veterans Justice Outreach Coordinator at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs in Lebanon County. I think moving forward, I'll continue to work with the chair about potentially identifying guest speakers. I think that was a really valuable addition to the policy meeting on specific topics that we're focused on. The next one, again, could be in this veteran space, but welcome suggestions as well, because I think that was a powerful way to obtain information not just for staff, but for the commission members as well on a particular topic. Historically, we've done that. We had a speaker, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, who was an expert on domestic violence pretrial risk assessment tools from Arizona State University. And similarly, since she's the world's expert on the topic, was able to educate us in a brief period on a pretty complicated and challenging topic. So with that, I'll turn it to the chair to I'll just make an announcement that our next meeting is December 11th and 12th, scheduled in Harrisburg. Information about that meeting will come out. We'll share that with you again in November about lodging and logistics surrounding that. And then for those in the room, before I turn it to the chair, lunch is available, so even those who are leaving, please take some food for the road if you would like. That would be a great thing. So, Representative Krajewski.
All right, thank you, Matt. Is there anything folks want to bring up for the good of the group before we adjourn this meeting? Going once, going twice. Okay, all right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Folks in State College, get home safe, and we'll see everyone in December.
Thanks, everybody.